Loch. Yeah, did I pronounce that right? Loch Kelly? Is that
Yes, Loch. It's like Loch Lomond or Loch Ness. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very unique name. Do
Yes.
you have any siblings? I'm just wondering.
Yes, I have. They all have kind of Gaelic names like Kieran Michael and Jamie Kathleen and Sean Owen.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's your background?
So I'm, grew up in New York City area, and my grandparents came from Ireland. In fact, I just got my Irish passport just in case I need it at any point to be able to live in Europe. So, but I grew up, in New York metropolitan area and went to school, graduate school here, and then traveled to India, Sri Lanka, Nepal to do some studies in meditation and kind of cross-cultural healing practices.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I was just wondering from your name because it is kind of unique, and if your siblings did have similar unique names. I'm half Irish as well.
Okay.
I'm the first one born in Canada, and my mother came over from Ireland in her teens or something like that. And
Okay.
Raised in Cork.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I have some family in Cork, yeah.
Yeah, and she actually goes back and forth quite a bit. She's trying to convince me to go a lot lately. So
yeah, it's a beautiful place to visit. It's really lovely. The people are wonderful.
Yeah, I hear. And then the castles and everything is really whimsical.
Yeah, really great.
Okay, cool. So do you mind just to kick things off, just briefly introducing yourself, what it is you're involved with on a day-to-day basis? I know that you're an author and you have written several books. I'm sure we'll get into that, but just for anyone that's not familiar and is listening.
Sure, yes. So I'm Loch Kelly. I have a master in divinity and a master's in clinical social work. So I live in New York City. And right now I mainly travel around teaching a kind of synthesis of wisdom traditions, meditation, psychotherapy, and neuroscience, which are all areas that I studied. I'll tell a little about the background, but my sense is that what has been called awakening in the wisdom traditions is actually a stage of human development that's available to all of us, and that we've learned so much about so many things in the world, about how to create a microchip and things that I don't even understand how they could come up with that. But I've put the same amount of time and energy and interest in meeting the leading teachers and reading the sacred texts, which literally have just come out in the last 20 years, and testing out with groups of people around the U.S. and Canada and Europe, and have found that there is this shift, not just of a state of relaxation, which is kind of what a lot of mindfulness meditation has been used just to calm or de-stress, but these traditions are meant to bring us to what's called awakening. So what is that, and how do we do it, and what's the shift there? We can probably talk about. But the sense is that it is learnable, teachable, and that it literally goes to the root of suffering. So rather than just treating the symptoms of depression and anxiety, as many psychotherapist colleagues do, if you go to the root of the identity and who we take ourselves to be in this kind of small, separate sense of self, and we know how to upgrade to this sense of kind of open mind, open heart that's embodied and interconnected and kind of drops into this place of well-being and okayness and flow state, really, then there's this opportunity for us as individuals and a culture to kind of upgrade our lives in a way that we can, face a lot of things that are going on in our own lives and in the world today.
Mm-hmm. And so do your books and some of the events that you hold, are they practical teachings around how to achieve this, how to start taking those steps towards building an awareness towards this awakening process? Yes,
in fact, that's my whole thing, is that rather than philosophy and theory, and rather than even, kind of sitting up like a guru or a teacher that's, transmitting, I, in a very kind of Western practical way, okay, how do they do it? What do you need to do? Let me do it. And then kind of reverse engineer these advanced practices, and then create ways for different learning types, different learning styles. People are kinesthetic and visual, auditory, and literally deliver practical, experiential ways so you can feel this feeling of being in a separate sense of self and literally feel like your awareness can open or drop, and then feel that you're aware from this spacious awareness and embodied, and then, you know, start to be curious about how to begin to walk and talk, and then lose it, go back to this other operating system, and then learn to return, and then train to remain.
Okay. And now, does this start with conceptualizing the idea of openness and awareness and spaciousness? Like, how does one get to that point to even because some people would be listening to this, they won't know what you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
It just completely goes over their head. But then other people will be like, yes, that's it. He's speaking my language. Yeah. So does it start, for the people that don't quite understand, does it start with the conceptualization of it, the idea? Yes.
So there's, you know, there's a little, kind of a new map. And, you know, in some ways there's and when we kind of find a way to combine, you know, Eastern wisdom and Western science and psychology, we kind of need a new map. It's actually a fairly simple map, but it's kind of odd at first because it isn't dealing with the symptoms. It isn't saying, okay, how do I feel? Oh, I feel anxious. Oh, well then what makes you anxious? We'll stop doing that, or try to, you know, create a positive thought about not being anxious. And this model says, okay, that's all happening within a cloud of your own consciousness, which is this small ego-centered or, you know, small separate sense of self that you keep trying to clean up the cloud and move the pieces around. And ultimately, you really can't bear a fully emotional, sensitive human life from this small sense of self. So it's basically starts with this model that says, okay, that thought-based identity, even this belief, I think, therefore I am, is actually the problem. That's an operating system you could live your whole life from, but you're going to be perpetually dissatisfied on some level, if not chronically traumatized and unhappy in a way that makes you either depress your energy and then you're depressed, or try to manage your energy and then you're anxious. And so the model is just saying there's a small self and you can upgrade to this more open mind instead of a small thought-based mind. There's an awareness-based mind, and from a small felt sense of a little mini me looking out of my eyes to a feeling that you kind of drop from head to heart. You feel more open and interconnected the way you do when you walk in nature, or the way you are when you're in a flow state, doing an activity you love, like a sport or something like that. And that's your actual natural state. And so these small glimpse practices literally just show you how to intentionally access and feel the difference between small sense of self, open, embodied, oh, I see, and then feel how you lose it or what triggers you back, and then feel that when you're in this open field of awareness that has a loving presence, you can actually be with the contents, not only of thoughts, but of emotions, traumatized parts, shame-based parts of you, that you can now have the capacity to actually unburden them, where from a small smart self you can't, because they're too strong, and so you have to keep repressing them.
Mm-hmm. And I know I watched a video of yours actually before hopping on this call, and I know you had mentioned that it can actually come up as well, say from the root or sacral, and this could be part of your story, part of your trauma, part of your morphic resonance and in your genetics in a way, coming from past generations, you know, going back many, many generations even, and carry this as a human race. So it's almost as if it's a trying to mediate between the thinking mind, the over-analytical mind, and then that lower trauma in the lower chakras, say, and trying to find that center point, which is the heart, and then operate from there. So do you find that a lot of people are dealing with that societal trauma, with that with that resonance from, previous generations, their upbringing, whatever it may be. The first part of that is, do you find people are dealing with that? And the second is, what is the main modality you find that helps them overcome some of that, or at least break free of it briefly to see that there are greener pastures?
Yeah, certainly that people describe it in different ways. And in some ways, it depends on their map. So some people may feel this like, oh, something's coming from my lower body. And if they don't have a belief or a map that says, oh, this could be past, trauma from society or from past lives or from, they may just say it's just always been here. So whatever that is, it seems to be felt the same way. And whatever they describe seems to be able to be healed, not from the small sense of self, and not just the emotional heart, and not just the heart chakra, and not just the physical heart, but literally like a heart mind, which is like a door or a space that actually opens up kind of behind you to what I say is like awareness has your back. And so that awareness then kind of connects you to a, kind of a unity consciousness or a bigger intelligence that then comes and meets your conditioning from whatever, levels that is. And then it's almost like you look out of the eyes of the heart mind, and you've kind of dropped, and you have this kind of almost feeling of being supported from something greater than yourself that's not other than yourself. So it's not as if there's a, we could do a couple little glimpses, because that's the unique thing about this, is that that in this study, my interest was, can anybody access what's been called awakening in the middle of a busy life, or do you have to become an Olympic athlete of meditation, go into a cave or a monastery? And, I found cultures and times that people had done it, in the midst of everyday life. And then those practices I gathered, and now there's been hundreds and thousands of people who are in this process of awakening, and it tends to create a motivation to be, to be helpful and to do social justice and to do your own healing, instead of like making you like a couch potato or more passive, as if, oh, now I'm meditating, I'm very relaxed, and everything's fine. It literally kind of engages you in more joy, and when your suffering starts to be relieved.
Is that similar to like a spontaneous enlightenment? Like that brief glimpse that you may turn back to your busy, hectic craziness, but you have a glimpse through the window.
Yes.
Is that similar to that?
Yeah, so some people have had spontaneous awakenings, which, they don't know they've never studied anything, they're not even interested, and all of a sudden something will break through. And in some ways, when you look at what that was, it's almost like the small self got overwhelmed, so it let go, or they got so relaxed and so connected to some loving source or presence that it just allowed that natural awakening to come through. Some people certainly have had glimpses through psychedelics and other things like that. And a lot of the young generation that come to me have had these initial awakenings, or different shifts of consciousness, or seeing some other dimensions. And so what I teach is kind of micro meditations rather than microdosing. So once people have had a glimpse, you can have these little glimpses that are not quite as trippy, but do access the kind of love and interconnection and sense of spacious, non-chattering mind, well-being, and that, and by doing small glimpses many times during the day, you start to be able to kind of get the results of a 5-day retreat in 5 minutes. And then the even more important thing is you go from there right back to talking, typing, relating, creating from this new sense of self. And that's what actually makes the neuroscience, that's what gives you the new normal. Your brain starts to pattern in a way that it rewires to an awakened consciousness, so you start to be able to live from this flow.
That's pretty well said. Yeah, I was running about it, that I know for me in particular, I am overly analytical, and my job is like in a technical field. So it's, I always think of my day-to-day routine as being like, I have to maintain myself in the center of a wheel. And if I get caught on the outer spoke of the wheel, I just spin and spin, and my energy gets drained. And by the end of it all, it's like what you were saying with sometimes where the small self, the mind, will shut down like an operating system. It'll get overloaded, overheated, shut down, and then it's that natural spaciousness ends up coming through just by default, because I do believe this is our default state of being.
That's right.
And all these external stimuli are just causing, it's just muddying the water of our default state. So it's very interesting how you describe it. So just to shift gears a little bit, I know you're a friend and a colleague with Lama Surya Das.
Yes, that's right.
I wanted to briefly just touch on that, because he was on a previous episode, and I've spoken to him a couple times, and I just want to see how you two met.
Yeah. So, I mean, interestingly, you know, I had, you know, a couple kind of spontaneous awakenings as a young person. One was actually in sports, kind of doing getting into the zone and into a flow, and then realizing, oh my God, how did I get here? And then finding a way to do that. And when I did that, when I was actually playing ice hockey goalie, a sportscaster had said, on TV about a football game, he's got eyes in the back of his head. And I kind of went, eyes in the back of his head. Oh, I know what that is, but it's not visual, and it's not like I'm seeing what's behind me. Let me see if I can do that. And I literally started opening my awareness, and my peripheral vision opened, so people can do that. And we kind of do that when we drive a car. But then I just continued around to be aware of sound at the side, and then almost felt like, oh, how is that happening? My awareness is continuing around 360 degrees. And when it did, it just kind of dropped me into my body, and I kind of felt like a cat. I felt like, oh, this is it. I just did that intentionally, what usually took me, you know, like playing a sport or doing something in order to get there. So then I was telling this to my teammates, and one of the seniors on the team, I was like a sophomore in high school, threw me a book, Zen and the Art of Archery. And so I thought, oh, well, look at this. This, you know, people are doing this, and they value this, and they do this. Let me, you know, start to study that. And so that led me to graduate school and to this fellowship that took me to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal. And in Nepal, I met a Tibetan teacher who was teaching the same thing Lama Surya Das studies and teaches, which is called Dzogchen or Mahamudra, which are these advanced practices, which are actually simpler and kind of the essence of all the practices. And so this teacher, within 3 minutes, you know, had me shift my awareness, and I went like, oh my God, this is the same thing. And I checked it out, and so studied a lot of the same things that Lama Surya Das. So he and I met, and we both kind of endorsed each other's books and become good friends, because we're kind of Westerners, which there are very few that teach in this kind of way, kind of pioneers in this way of giving out these kind of simple, what seem esoteric, but eventually they're literally take the same amount of time to learn these as to learn yoga or to learn, you know, basic mindfulness meditation.
And do you see it like an evolution? I know this was a while ago that you would have met him, but have you seen a progressive evolution, or even a speeding up of the interest of, you know, people in society upon taking this upon themselves?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's still a curiosity. I think what's built is yoga and mindfulness. So, and those are the preliminary practices to these to what Lama Surya Das and I teach. So, you know, so many people do yoga, which is relaxing the body, and then mindfulness movement has become almost like research to show that it allows you to step above and observe contents of consciousness, to show that you're not identified and attached to them. And these are classic preliminary practices. The next thing that we're doing, and that I do in this book, is kind of create a way to say, okay, the yoga, then mindfulness, now what I'm calling effortless mindfulness is opening to the awareness that's already aware by itself without your help, and feel like you're interconnected and trusting that you can then talk and walk and speak from a sense of self that isn't having to go back to create a little manager all the time. And just that little secret kind of, there's a Taoist text called The Secret of the Golden Flower.
Yeah, I've read that. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, and so what is the secret? The secret is, they say, turn the light of awareness around. That is the sublime truth. And so what that means is literally, instead of looking out from the awareness at things, even internal things, external things, just feel like, well, all right, I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that. Now feel, oh, I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of seeing, and now just feel, all right, but what's aware behind the camera? Like, is there a little me looking? Okay, well, what's behind that? And just by opening up, looking through the meditator, and there's different ways of doing that, or resting back, it opens up to a greater self, a self first. It's like a no self. You're not this little self only, but then it's like, oh, look at that. This is the spacious, open, what's called open mind or open heart. And there you are, boom. So it literally can be learned, in an hour and a half. People, 8 out of 10 people will get their first glimpse.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, they can begin to start operating or seeing through the heart. Is that the objective?
Yes. Yeah. They end up, feeling like there's a spacious, embodied, and then open-hearted view. And then, you lose it, and then, the saying is no big surprise, just re-recognize. And then you learn how to just re-recognize, and you do this, small moments during the day, and that's what starts to familiarize yourself. That's the Tibetan word for meditation, is translated as familiarize. So you're really just familiarizing yourself with this new normal, this awakened consciousness. And, many people believe that's, oh, it's not for me, oh, I'm not ready, but I've worked with people with severe trauma, and they actually are able to recognize it. And not only that, but it's what they need, because they access this greater capacity to be with these parts of themselves that they can't bear from a small sense of self. So within sessions, they're like, oh my God, this is me. I'm back again, and I'm now with this part that wants to hurt myself, and I'm with this part that wishes I didn't have to deal with this, And it's like, oh, okay. So it opens this view, and, from where you're looking.
Would that be called the witness then? Just allows that person to establish themselves as the witness. This is the true self?
Yeah, the witness is kind of the first step. It's almost like you open to the witness, and then the next step is actually kind of unity consciousness. So it's almost like in mindfulness at its highest level, called deliberate mindfulness, is a witness, like a big sky that's aware of things coming and going. And then in effortless mindfulness, you realize, oh, wait a minute, the sky that's aware is also within. Oh, and I'm aware of my body from within. Oh, and that extends to being more like an ocean of awareness that's arising as me, the wave, and that connects to everyone else as the wave. So it's almost like small self, witness, unity, ocean, go to like pinpoint, sky, ocean, and then you're connected and flowing. You're in a kind of a flow. That's actually the first time I've said it that way. Thank you. That actually is a good little, move from 3 metaphors,
Yeah, it seems like a very step-by-step process to gradually take someone through it. I mean, I've done many different meditation practices. One of my favorite is, it leans more towards a Dzogchen style, or even a Zen, just complete stillness. I like to watch treetops swaying, bring myself to complete no thought in those
Yeah.
cases. I've had, I've tried psychedelics, and I have this very intense feeling. I tried an ingestible DMT before, which was like very long high. I've done the one where you smoke blast off.
Okay.
But this ingestible, which is almost overwhelming, that one. This ingestible one, I was just walking around, I had this sense of connectiveness where the breeze that was moving through the air was then moving through me, and it was all just in union with itself.
Yeah.
And I was just almost like a code of some sort, in an overarching system of code.
Yeah.
And just this algorithm of symmetry and geometry, and it was all just, and I couldn't really put a word to it, just as an expression. The only thing I could think is a love expression, or an expression of God, source, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
But it moves through everything. And I had this very intense feeling of the sense of, and psychedelics really helps bring me back to that reality, because then when I come out of that, people will tell me that this is the reality, and I question it. I basically have concluded this is one form of reality, and that we choose to perceive it the way we do. So I wanted to ask you, do you find that a lot of people that are older, later in life, have more difficulty than the younger people in terms of coming to this realization?
Yeah, I mean, let me just say something about that, what you just said, which was beautiful kind of description of that. And, those who feel safe and, that's a doorway, certainly. I just talked to one of my nieces who's in her 20s, and I just asked her, how many of your peers are doing psychedelics? She said, pretty much everyone. Once in a while, well, not a lot of time, just once in a while, and so certainly that has to be acknowledged, that that's a door. So these micro meditations are literally, like you said, it was an intense feeling of that, but that's kind of how I feel, like on a low level. If you took the intensity and kind of spread it out thinly, through the room or through the space, like that feeling of connection and love, okayness, non-worry, non-shame, is what you can access as a daily kind of shift back to this more primary dimension of consciousness. Wouldn't that be great, is what I thought. I thought, okay, if I can really find a way to do this that is safe and easy and daily, so that's been my interest, is to shift that way. Do you want me to show you one of the little practices? Yeah, so this one is, again, I kind of do many different doorways. So if this doesn't work for someone, there's other doorways. But the premise is that the obstacle to this consciousness that feels interconnected and loving is just this cloud that's created by this operating system that's thought-based. So just to start to feel like there's this little mini-me that's made of thought, and what it's doing is it's trying to solve the problem. It's very innocent, so you don't need to like kill the ego or fight the ego, or you just need to realize, oh, it's just trying to solve this problem of who am I, what's going on, am I safe, but it's talking about itself from thought, and it can't ever feel safe. It's perpetually dissatisfied because it's made of thought, looking for something to eat or to satisfy itself. So if that problem solver just relaxes, those who are listening might just feel the awareness opens up to what's behind that cloud, and then just to feel the qualities that arise. So the simple inquiry is just this, just to hear it with your mind and then look with awareness. What's here now when there's no problem to solve? And just take a minute. Kind of feel back and down. And what's aware? Where are you aware from? What was here that kind of is now absent or relaxed? And then what dimensionality or qualities of who you are come forward? So what do you notice?
Every time I do something like I can very quickly get into those states. Every time it's almost I end up laughing at myself.
Yeah.
I always just that's what I get back every single time. Just a cosmic giggle.
Yeah.
It's, anything that I think is an issue.
Yeah.
It's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue because it's not, and so it's just showing that little mini me is just making every little thing into a problem that could be dangerous, that could be threatening to who I am. But the who I am is a thought-based who I am. It's not even your physical safety. So as soon as you relax that, there's a laugh like, well, what was I, where was I, what was I thinking, who was thinking, and then to start to feel who's laughing and the quality of kind of spaciousness and, relaxed being, so that then the question becomes for those, and those listening or watching can try this again slower and stop the video or audio and take your time when you inquire. Then be curious, okay, is this a state, a meditation state when I discover what's here when there's no problem? Or is this actually me, to which now any other states actually are coming and going, including a state which kind of recreates a little thought-based me. Maybe that's the state. And this giggling universal sense of freedom is the baseline of not a state, but actually the natural condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the premise of these kind of Dzogchen Mahamudra, that this is the natural mind, this is the source of mind, nature of mind, and all those others, which we call me, are actually just states that form into parts of us. And so once you feel the you that has no problem, then you can say, okay, now any problems, you're all welcome. Come on back to me. And now if something comes up, oh yeah, what about this? I'm so worried about that. And you stay home and don't identify or debate. You just go like, oh yeah, you're really worried about that. Wow. Okay, it's all right. I can listen. I'm here. Talk anything you want. Yeah, I'm really worried. I don't like the way the person talked to me. Oh yeah, that must be, upsetting. And you start to regard emotions like parts of you that are allowed to be any way they want. So it's kind of a real acceptance. And then you unburden and you find that the love now from the universal consciousness that's you starts to be able to be with, any parts of you that are hurt or angry or terrified or rageful. It's like no judgment. Okay, you're really rageful. Okay, well, I'm interested. Here, tell me, So it really is like a shift of identity.
Mm-hmm. And not getting identified with that emotion as it comes up is very challenging for some people.
Yes.
It's almost like looking at a very exciting roller coaster. The ego loves it, I'm sure.
Right.
An exciting roller coaster that, like, should I get on that? It looks like it'll be a fun ride, but at the end you're throwing up. So it's not worth it.
That's right. So that becomes one of the things about state. So you do that, what's here when there's no problem to solve. Then you feel like, oh, there's no problem. Then you say, okay, now I'm going to wait here until, in fact, bring a problem on. And then you feel the pull to contract into that part of you that comes up and goes, yeah, that's right. What about this situation? And then you just stay in this effortless mindfulness, loving connection, but you don't collapse or identify. And then you just feel the capacity. So even if it's a lot of emotion, there's just so much more space for it to go. It's what I call shake and bake. So it starts to like shake and bake. It's like, whoa, but like a roller coaster, but you're also outside the roller coaster, kind of watching the roller coaster and going like, whoa, okay, there's some part of me that's riding a roller coaster, but some part of me is the sky, and some part of me is like this embracing love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you have you done any studies into ancient Egyptian? And the reason I ask is because you seems you're heavily focused around the heart and the eye of the heart. This is very predominant in Egyptian mythologies. And everything. I mean, even their embalming process or mummification, they would remove the brain from the nose, they keep the heart, and this was very crucial going into the next world.
Yeah.
So do you have any background in studying that? I'm just curious.
I've done kind of a little with all the wisdom traditions, and I know the Egyptian, cosmology and their practices and their mythologies are, all what we have. I think we don't have as much from the culture that's been preserved in terms, because some of it's in a language that hasn't been able to be translated yet. But certainly the iconography and as you say, the heart. There's a story about the first neuroscientists that went to Tibet to study Tibetan meditation. They brought these big EEG machines, and they, the ones that have like the caps with the little white nodes on them. Mm-hmm. So they had, at that time, it was like suitcases of machines that they brought, and then they were talking to the monks, the young monks, and they were like, okay, we're going to study meditation to help people understand the shift. And they were all, okay, yes, we'll very love to do that. Then they said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to put this cap on, and we're going to measure and they all started giggling. They were like, and then the scientists were like, what? You don't understand? No, we're going to measure the brain waves through these cap. And they were like, well, someone say something. What's going on? I said, what are you looking at this for? The meditation's here. Mm-hmm. Well, what is that? Why would you look up there? And so the feeling of, the seeing from being is literally that feeling that I do as one of my main practices, literally feeling that awareness is attached or identified to thinking, and like awareness, like a globe, can unhook and drop and feel your jaw from within your jaw. And then the center of your knowing can feel your throat, the dynamics, energy and awareness. And then you feel like awareness as your center drops and knows your body, upper body from within, and then kind of opens or merges with this heart space, like the space within an atom in this open heart mind. And then you're aware of your heart space, and you're aware from your heart space. Mm-hmm. And literally doing that, once you get, like, that takes 2 minutes. I do it on a subway in New York City, and it changes everything. Mm-hmm. It literally because once you go deep within, it opens you up and connects you, and then connects me to everyone on the subway. And then I'm literally looking around and just close my eyes, and then open my eyes, and then other people start closing their eyes and like smiling. It's just like another vibration happens. It's
a practice on itself just to be doing that in the middle of New York City as well.
Yes, it is. And it's kind of a giving practice. It's kind of, they call it in Tibetan Buddhism, Tonglen practice, which is called giving and taking from this heart space. Mm-hmm. Sending and receiving, yeah.
I lived in the city of Toronto for many years, and now I'm just on the outside of it because I couldn't continue that practice much longer.
Okay.
Too many people. It drives me absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that, so that for sure. So just before we hop off, I do have a few more questions for you. Now, What are your thoughts on technology? And it seems to be so immersive now, and now we're talking about people are going to be putting in electrodes into their brain. That you've got Elon Musk who's created Neuralink, and they're just going to start human trials. So it's just becoming more symbiotic with humans.
Yes.
Do you see this as an interference, a distraction, or do you think this is something that could aid the progression of awareness and awakening in humanity?
Yeah. I mean, I think it could aid in the long run. I mean, I think there'll be a lot of, pseudo methods that end up being misinformed or trying to override or make something happen that isn't natural. Because even the neuroscience with the fMRIs initially started looking at just calm states, and now they're actually realizing, oh, the awake state isn't just the calm, that's the first one. It's actually what's called the synchronized gamma, and this balancing of the default mode network, which basically feels more like joy and love. So it actually is dynamic and creative. The awake state isn't the calm part of the brain. It's the juicy kind of like, oh my God. Sometimes I describe it as like the feeling of a kid on the first day of summer vacation is what you feel like when you do these glimpses. So, you know, there's definitely networks of the brain and parts of the brain that could be trained through technology, through, you know, certainly biofeedback, neurofeedback, maybe I know there's been some interventions with people who have epilepsy and other kinds of neurological disorders of implants or electronic, you know, interventions that have been helpful. So certainly not against that, but I think we can learn, you know, first of all, I mean, that's the project probably Suryadas and I are on for the next intense, you know, 5 years, and with this book to kind of train a group of people to be able to shift into this natural condition and live from it and then teach others. So it just becomes kind of a democratic, it's much more of a, not a guru style, but the advanced practices are democratic and kind of empower people to be their best selves. Yeah.
And do you think this notion of the guru is starting to die off a little bit? Because it almost contradicts itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that I'm a little, because, you know, many of my traditions, the traditional traditions of, you know, like Advaita Vedanta and Tibetan Buddhism have a guru system, but, you know, the Buddha, Siddhartha Buddha, actually rejected the whole guru system and, you know, said, you know, begin and his last words were like, begin and persevere. And, you know, the Zen saying is, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill him, which just means don't project a guru outside. So there is that tradition, I think, that in the 60s and 70s in the West became a big guru culture of the search. The guru system seemed to catch hold, but, you know, most of them became cults, and people ended up as dependent children, looking up to, you know, projection onto a parent figure, that they were like, oh, there's the guru, my guru is awake, and someday maybe I'll be, but meantime, I'll just worship their feet. And now it's like, okay, the premise is the same awakening is equally available within each of us. So let's all help each other discover and flourish. And so in that way, we need to listen and be more sensitive to people's identities and cultures and different expressions and you know, adapt.
I've been listening to the Diamond Sutras for the past.
Oh yeah.
I listen to it I pretty much every morning, and
Okay.
I've listened to it dozens and dozens of times, and it reminds me of when Subhuti in the sutras asks the Buddha about attaining enlightenment, and the Buddha's response is that if you are seeking to attain enlightenment, then you are a separate individual, and you identified yourself as a separate individual identity that's going to seek that thing. So you've immediately missed the mark on that one, basically.
Right.
It almost sounds like what you're saying with the guru. And if you're so focused up at something else, you're just missing the fact that lies within you.
That's it.
Yeah, it's just really interesting, because I find it very popular, especially with social media, because a lot of people will follow all these different spiritual figures or these you know, influencers and everything else, and it's so visceral, so external to them, and it's almost, they think that, like, they put them up on a pedestal, and I think it defeats the whole purpose, which is really the main reasons I have this podcast. One of the main reasons I have the Instagram page I do, because I need people to realize that within themselves, as opposed to constantly looking to these, you know, external influences, these individuals, and then claiming that they're, you know, they're the path and that they're going to teach them. But it really is a self-teaching. It really begins from within. Yeah. Yeah.
So I came up with a little line, you know, that the role of a teacher is to introduce you to your inner teacher.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So
I could make a quote for that, and it would probably go viral.
Okay. Go for it.
I'll do it. I'll tag you, and
Okay. Yeah. So that's really and even guru yoga ends up there. It's supposed to be, oh, you start with a guru, then you realize the guru is above their head. Oh, it's above my head. Oh, the guru is within. So there's, I think we can skip, to the final truth. In our culture, I think it's just a democratic culture. It's a different time, and to empower each other. Yeah, because there's that outward focus with media and with seeking in general. That's all times and all places. But then now it's like, oh, let me listen to this podcast. Let me listen to this. Read this book. There's a good information. I'll get more information. But it's like, so this whole practice book, The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, is saying, all right, turn your awareness around. I'm talking, but what I'm doing is saying, look that way and find that which is behind your mind, which is open and already peaceful and isn't using thought. And then just be aware from there back to embrace and embody, and then connect with everyone else. And literally that's the kind of simple map. Open into the awareness in the room, realize that there you actually have discovered kind of an aware space or an open mind. Then just be aware that awareness is behind your back. And like an ocean of awareness, that's both outside and equally within, and then looks out of your heart and is already connected to this experience similar to what you were talking about, where you feel this more loving, connected sense of well-being. And you'll notice that the intelligence is on board, because it's not like you've become dumb and numb, that you actually go into what's often referred to as optimal mind of a flow state. So somebody in a flow state who's playing a violin in an orchestra, or an athlete, is seeing everything's slowed down, they're in the now, they're able to access information, but they don't refer to ego, they feel a sense of joy, and they're connected, and they're feeling the other people on the team or in the orchestra, and they know what's happening, but they're not going up to thought to think about what they're going to do. They're in their optimal mind, and it's very highly functional but joyful. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing that makes it really accessible in the midst of our daily life.
Yeah, it sounds super peaceful. It sounds like I want to be in that state right now, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really peaceful, really relaxing. Yeah. So I don't actually have any other questions for you right now, but did you have any closing thoughts for anyone that's listening to this, or anything you wanted to just plug? Or I'm going to include all links, everything, all resources in the description of the podcast, so you don't have to cover everything, but any closing thoughts for anyone that's listening?
Yeah, I mean, this has been wonderful to talk to you and to be connected to your audience. It's that there are learnable, teachable tools available that have been passed down through generations and are now have been kind of reverse engineered into contemporary language and experiential practices, and that awakening is possible for you. It's what can help our whole culture, and it goes right to the root of suffering. No matter how anxious you feel or feel like you're not ready for it, you can glimpse it and give it a try, and you'll be surprised that it's kind of what you already do with your free time. You probably go walk in nature, but what if you could do the same thing sitting at a desk in the middle of the day when you feel bored or worried or overwhelmed? What if you could just shift out of that and then come back? And once you learn how to navigate your own consciousness in this simple way that takes a little time to learn, but is not difficult. It's not simple, but it's not difficult. And then you have an opportunity now in this time in our day and age to live a open-hearted, awakened life.
That's beautiful. Well, actually, when you were saying that, it reminded me of another psychedelic trip I had using magic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, which I would consider a form of technology. I was actually, I do meditations in the morning in my shower, and I have a shower in my basement, and it's a stone, it's on stone, which I think is really helpful as well for me to be deep into the earth on sort of a granite stone. And I had this sense of, when the water was pouring over me, it was this well, infinite well of love, of like divine love. And it's always pouring over all of us. And it's up to us to choose to nourish ourselves with it, to tap into it, to take that, just that moment, just have a sip.
Yes.
And then to come back renewed and rejuvenated. And I feel like that's more deeply rooted in truth and reality than a lot of the, visceral things we do experience. So beautiful. Share that. I just had that thought when you were describing it, but
that sounds like a shower you can have most days of the week if you really once you learn that the technologies work periodically, but there's literally a daily way to kind of fine-tune your consciousness to access that natural loving presence, and it's a great way to live.
I've had the same meditation I'll do, and it takes, sometimes I won't reach that state, at all. Sometimes I'll get there in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but a week could go by, and I don't have that same sense of connectivity that, something like a psilocybin mushroom will do. Right. But I think that doing those meditations is definitely a good glimpse into, especially if someone's not interested in trying any drugs or psychedelics.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the natural state is there, and I think it just takes that practice, and the belief really is super important. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time to have this.
Sure. And I'll just, so just to say, that my new book's called The Way of Effortless Mindfulness. It's a guidebook. It's really a practice book with these small glimpses. And then my website is just lochkelly.org, LOCHKELLY.org. So I look forward to meeting some of you, and great to talk with you today, Adam.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again. And I'll shoot you a message with all the links and everything, just so you have it handy once it's up as well.
Thanks so much. This has been great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.